Welcome back to the Virtual Cafe Summer Speaker Series. I'm joined today by Steph. Steph is the owner of Addictive Pole Fitness, as well as the host of the Uncovered podcast. I'm going to do a quick little cafe cheers with me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm excited to be on the other end. Normally it's me interviewing you.
I know. I thought I'd just turn the tables for us today and flip the script and see how we go. So I've been lucky enough to be on the other side many a times. I've obviously done something okay because you've had me back a couple of times on the Uncovered.
I have. And people keep asking me to have you back more. So I'm like, you must be doing something okay. Probably a good thing that you're doing this summer. Is it summer season? Summer sessions?
Summer speaker series.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, we just ran summer sessions at the studio, so it's in my brain. Because people definitely want to hear from you. So this is great.
Yeah, well, hopefully they're enjoying it so far. So
yes,
they're going to learn so much from you today. We have a big session planned because I've got in my head a lot of things I want to chat to you about. So today I'm picking your brain in terms of your business experience, and talking about the journey to studio ownership. So before we kind of hit the deck in terms of talking about studio stuff, can you give everyone a little bit of a background on you as an individual, your study done to date, and then we can talk about studio stuff.
Yeah, so I probably a really good background to start with is I previously worked in banking and finance, predominantly in business finance. So one of my roles was auditing small businesses that had a particular product with the bank. So I've been in a lot of businesses. I've seen a lot of great businesses, a lot of bad businesses. So I have exposure to business in that sense. But whilst at the bank, I started my pole journey actually. So I started it when I was 22 in 2012. So it's been a while. And I loved pole. I obviously got addicted. So many of us can resonate and feel with that. And while there, I worked through a bunch of different roles, predominantly in business finance. And during that time, became a pole dancing instructor at the studio that I now own, and got while studying my MBA actually, because if you're in banking or finance and you don't have an undergrad, you've got a ceiling, right? Unfortunately, as much as my experience was valuable, when you sit down with hierarchies in a corporate setting, it's normally like, I literally remember being asked, Steph, what's your trade? I'm like, my trade? Like, what are you talking? Like, I think about trade as like carpenter, hairdresser.
Sure.
And like, I didn't think about it as my undergrad degree. And I'm like, oh, I started my business degree when I left school. I wanted to be a teacher. I made the decision to go into business and I dropped out after about 18 months. I like failed everything, hated it, wasn't my vibe, just not the thing I wanted to do, got a full-time job and kept going from there. So I was like, oh, I don't have an undergrad. So I started looking about studying business because that was where I was. And I really wanted to get into leadership in the corporate world. So when I was doing that studying, I actually was talking to, or when I was doing that research, I was talking to a girlfriend who was a pole dancer, and she was quite high up in HR. And she's like, Steph, you've got all this experience. Why are you looking at undergrads? Because I didn't want to commit myself to a 6-year study part-time. I'd seen my life been flipped in about 12 months. And I'm like, what's going to happen in 6 years if I do this undergrad? Like, I'm not going to want to do this. Anyway, coming back to the girlfriend from Pole, she's like, why don't you do a postgrad? I'm like, do I have the qualifications to do that? And for a business administration postgrad, you just need leadership experience because it's predominantly a master's of business administration, or an MBA, as you call it. You either need to have an undergrad and 1 year's leadership experience or have 3 years leadership experience.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So I was like, my husband at the time was studying one, and I started looking at what he was studying. I'm like, I get this. I understand this. Could I go and do a master's? And this was like completely not something I'd ever thought I was going to do. Anyway, I signed up for my postgrad cert in business administration, cried after I left the interview. I'm like, I'm not getting it. It's not happening. Anyway, got in, started studying that, and made the decision to continue on to my master's. All of this while I'm still in banking. And then, the opportunity came up to buy my pole studio, and I jumped at it. And a month later, I owned it. So, yeah, that's a little bit of background. So I've been in pole for about 10 years, nearly 11 years. I've been in business probably just as long, just in different ways. But like I've been predominantly working with businesses since I was about 21.
I love that so much. What's fascinating for me is the fact that you went into an MBA, because let's face it, that's full on in itself. An MBA is incredible. But I love the fact that part of your MBA actually focused on some pole-based aspects, which would have been, it would have been
I'm like, oh, yes.
yes, it would have been great at the time, because no one would have done an MBA specific to pole dancing. Well, at least I'm sure there would have been very few and far between. So you certainly broke the ground.
Yeah. Well, what's really funny is that so I was doing my MBA, which is just your master's. They also have what's called an EMBA, which is your executive master's of business administration. And there was somebody in that. So that's generally for people who are higher leadership or want to do it in a more immersive style. And she brought a pole studio 6 months before I brought mine. So we were both studying at the same university at the same time in very similar programs, and we both brought pole dancing studios. So what are the likelihood? Her and I have since connected and catch up regularly. And but yeah, I did, because the study of which I did, a lot of it is on your business or on your work, or they want you to be practical, which is probably the only way I got through it, was the practicality, because the theory side isn't my strong point. And I was able to do all these things on projects I liked. And I did quite a few on pole. And I remember doing one for entrepreneurship, and we had to, I still love this idea, this concept. So I won't share the concept, because hopefully one day I'll be able to pull it off. But I remember sitting there, and they bring out external panels. So people who, are investors, have started their own businesses, and 3 girls up there, because it was a group thing, and presenting on pole dancing. And like, we got the highest marks, and they still talk about that thing. I did start with a video of pole dancing, but we needed that shock factor. We needed people to go, who are these women and what are they talking about? But yeah, they loved what we were doing and why we were doing it. But I was definitely the first to present in entrepreneurship about a pole dancing topic. So yeah, it was interesting. The men in the room, I wasn't the first speaker. I think I was like the third speaker. I was the last one. And watching their faces was interesting, because they're all like professional men. They're all, executives or senior leadership. And it's like, yeah.
They probably just didn't know what to do, where to look. How long ago was that? Because there would have been a shock factor.
Yeah, so that was 2019, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's definitely, pole is becoming a little bit, still not mainstream, but it's becoming a little bit more accepted. And many facets of it worldwide. But yeah, I can imagine you put a video of, it depends what's in the video, if it's more sexualized content versus not, but going to go into shock, that's for sure. But regardless of that, all I'm hearing here is that you are the perfect person to talk to about the journey to studio ownership, because you are not just, you're not just a student. Sorry, that came off terrible.
That's fine.
You're a student that then became an instructor, that also has got some serious business qualifications as well, and did a big component of your MBA on that particular topic, owning a pole studio and running that, and as well as the other concept that you're talking about, and then bringing it to life. So yeah, all I'm hearing is that you are the perfect person to pick your brains.
Yeah. I've had a very interesting journey, that's for sure. And especially because I brought my studio in December 2019. So my first term was January, February, March 2020. So not only did I become a new studio owner, I also had to go online in a very short period of time. So definitely had an interesting journey. And that is definitely where I would say my studies have just helped me 100%.
Imagine, make you more resilient and give you a broad range of knowledge in terms of how to manage those situations. Happy
100%.
year anniversary then to Addicted.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
exciting.
it is. So, Christmas Eve is technically the day we settled, because I purchased my studio. So, yeah, every Christmas Eve, it's a mini sell. It's a sort of a holy shit. Like, I've now owned the studio for 3 years, and it's just been such an interesting journey for sure. Like, I've had this is last year's my first year of consistency. The first year I didn't have a lockdown, just the first year that I can actually be consistent. So I'm really excited for this year because I'm like, I've had 1 year of like normalcy, normalcy, but like this is now the next year. So I can build on what I did last year because everything I'd done before was survival.
Yes. Yeah.
100%.
And then I know how important the first 3 years are to the growth of a business. So not only were you trying to grow a business, but then growing it during lockdown is so challenging. So you
Yeah. Well, you started your business in lockdown, didn't you?
did. It kind of my model was designed for lockdown in a way. So
Yeah.
being an online business model makes it a little bit easier from that.
100%.
You never set out to create an online business, so a little bit different. Mine was a little bit of probably even easier journey compared to yourself. So yeah, but like you said, yours was a bit more survival in the first few years, and now you've got the normalcy and then the ability to grow the business and go from there. So excited to see where it takes you in the next few years.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
So
I'm very excited.
yeah, let's chat about I guess the people that are watching, because you own your own business, I own my own business. They may not at this point, they may, but they also
Mm.
may not. So I guess I want to ask you about, for those who are listening, and they might be students, they might be instructors that are thinking about opening their own business, or opening their own pole studio specifically. They probably want to know some nitty gritty, like hard facts. And I'm going to hit you with some hard questions in a second if you're ready.
Go for it. I'm excited.
Okay. First of all, can you turn a profit with a pole studio?
Uh, yes, you can.
Okay.
Depending how much you want to pay yourself, but and the size of your studio, obviously, but 100% you can. I don't think people would be in it if you couldn't,
Yeah.
because you still need to live at the end of the day. And everybody who is watching, you walk in, every time you walk into a pole studio, you walk into a business. And I know that some pole studios do exist as not for profits. I know they are in the world. But every time you deal with somebody in the pole world, it is generally a business. And I think it often gets forgotten because we are so community based, which I love. And that's why so many of us are in pole, because we love the community. We love the support that we get when you meet a fellow pole dancer from the other side of the world. But yeah, they are profitable. They definitely have their times, but they're profitable businesses.
I was going to say, are we talking about lucrative profitable, or like a surviving, having an okay, decent amount profitable?
I would say it depends on the way you get set up, right? Like for me, the way I started my business is I did take out a loan to purchase my studio. So I'm still paying a loan off, essentially. And some people start from scratch. And because I bought already established, my fee was probably a lot higher than what it would be if you're just starting from scratch and you just need to get your equipment. And when I say just, like, pole's still expensive. um, but yeah, they definitely, you take that out and that opens up additional profit because I no longer have to pay that. So it depends how your business is set up and what your model is like and how much you are in it. But definitely from the people I've seen, they're profitable. They're not flashy profitable is probably the word I'm looking for, but it's comfortable lifestyle profitable.
Yeah. So I guess there's many different studios that can be purchased. So you can, I guess, start a business up from scratch, find a space and build your own brand, or you could purchase into a business or a franchise or purchase a license, which we'll chat about that later.
Yeah.
But on average, how much would it cost to open a studio?
So and I don't think I brought this up in my journey, but I initially looked at purchasing a franchise for the current brand I'm in. So, and when I sat down, and this was 2000 and maybe 17, my initial upfront cost was going to be close to 100,000. So, but in saying that, the franchise structure at the time had very, what would you say? The rules around setting up was like you had to be a minimum square footage, so which meant you were always going to be a larger studio. So you're always going to have more poles. You're probably going to be generally in a warehouse style building. So it was about 100,000. That included my franchising fees, my poles, my rigging, the fees to even just host your first open day, the fees to be under the brand, the marketing, those types of things. So that was all included in that. So it would have been a close to $100,000 upfront commitment.
Yeah. And so you didn't accept that, well, you didn't take up the franchise.
No, I didn't feel, for me at the time, it didn't feel aligned. So it was I think it was mostly to do, if I look back now, it was mostly to do with the franchise and how, or if there was a potential to get out of it. And I'm the type of person, when I go into any role, I'm thinking about, like, even in the corporate world, I'm thinking about, how is this role going to serve me in the future? Like, what is this going to help me achieve later down the track? So I was thinking the exact same thing here. It's like, okay, I go into this franchise, but what if I outgrow my franchise? And what if I want to do something different? And so to get out of it was quite challenging. And I'm sure not all contracts are set that way. But that just didn't align and it wasn't something I wanted to do. So I was like, okay, maybe it's not the right time to buy a pole dancing studio or open a pole dancing studio.
So I think that's a really important point. First up is that check the agreements if you're looking at purchasing into a franchise. And for a lot of people, purchasing into a franchise is exactly what they want. They don't necessarily want to see their business grow outside of a franchise. So if you're that person, a franchise is obviously clearly for you. And then there's a lot of people who are not necessarily tied to a franchise emotionally. So whilst they're happy to purchase into a franchise, they might want to leave room for growth, or they might leave room for growth and they never grow out of it, but they've at least got that ability to do that. Whereas a lot of people just go, no, I want, this to be my baby built from scratch, and they don't do that. So you ended up purchasing a license instead, was my understanding. So in 20,
yeah, so the previous owner of the brand Addictive Pole Fitness was selling her studio, which is a studio I own now, which is the Underwood studio. And as a part of that sale, I had the opportunity to go in as my own brand, or I had the opportunity to license the Addictive Pole Fitness intellectual property. So being somebody who has been a part of APF since it started, since it was born, like I was there on the day that she announced it to the staff. I was there on the day it was announced to the students. I know the power of that brand in my local vicinity. And I was also working against time. Like, we went literally 1 month from inquiry to sale. And that's not normal. Like, 100% not normal. I think it's just my experience and her desire to get out, and knowing the right questions to ask. I don't think the due diligence was probably as long as it would be in any other area. Like, the due diligence, I was able to do a lot of it because I understood how businesses worked, which I don't think everybody would have that capability or that skill. So I didn't have time to create a brand. So I'm like, oh, well, the license, though, the agreement of the license had a lot of it, like, it was a lot easier to get out of. So I'm like, if I go in with this and I make the decision later down the track that I prefer to be my own brand, I have that ability to make that decision. So I didn't feel locked in, and I was happy to still promote. And there was definitely an emotional thing, like you said before. If you're emotionally tied to a franchise because you've been a student there since day dot and you love their philosophy, their mission, their vibes, then you'll probably feel a little bit like I did. And you're like, no, I can't kill, Addictive Pole Fitness Underwood. Like, I can't be that person that does that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a big part of it when you're that student there from day one. Like,
yeah, and like, for me, it was a big emotional decision. And, I definitely toyed with rebranding later down the line. It was a thought probably that, especially during COVID, I was like, okay, what am I doing? What do I want to do once we reopen? I don't know where I found extra time to think about a rebrand through COVID. I just realized that I'm like, I was already doing crazy hours, but yeah, it was really hard to give up
Yeah.
or think about giving up the brand that was.
When did you start Uncovered?
Started Uncovered October 2020.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know where you got the hours either. You are.
Fuck. Yeah, sorry. I'm like, I should have asked if swearing was okay.
It's fine.
Um, yeah, I don't know either.
R-rated. MA 15 plus.
MA 15 plus, just put trigger warning. Steph drops the F bomb. Can you put like when you upload a podcast, you could be like explicit versions, like you put explicit warnings on them. Don't worry, I won't say too many more.
That's fine. You can. I was going to say, if anyone takes offense to it, now's your time to stop watching. But we're all.
Yeah.
I was going to say on YouTube, I don't think I have that option, but I'll look into it.
You can do it's not appropriate for kids.
I've done
YouTube,
yes.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, these are definitely not appropriate for kids. Yes.
Yes, not made for kids, I think the option is. But yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you've given us so much information in terms of the background already. What about for those who want to open up a studio but they want to work a day job still as well? So, and there are some people I know, some studio owners who do both. They don't want to quit what they've currently got going on. They want to but they want to do both. They want to dabble. What's your thoughts on that? Is it possible?
So it's really interesting because I asked this question when I sat down for my franchise meeting because I'm probably a little risk adverse, and a lot of people are. Like, I've been in a corporate style environment full time since I was 19. The idea of going from such a set wage to like a question mark was really, really hard. So I was like, oh, cool. I can do this. I can support myself with my full-time job. Can I then run a studio? And I remember in this meeting, I was told by the franchisor, I was like, nope, like you need to be all in. Like it's not going to work. But I do know other people did then go and do both. They lasted about 6 months. And look, I would say, depending on the support, the size of your studio, like how many classes are you going to be teaching? Do you actually have the capacity physically, mentally to be able to do both? Depends what your job is too. Like at the time when I inquired, my job wasn't super mentally taxing. So I definitely felt that I could do both when I was looking at the franchise. However, that job had travel in it too. So how would that work if I had to be like in Perth for a week, but also trying to run my studio from Perth, potentially with only 1 or 2 instructors at the time, because it would be a new studio. So you would have to think about that. And like, you have to reply to DMs, you have to do your marketing, you have to do your bookkeeping. When do you do all this if you're also working a full-time job?
So much. I was going to say, I probably know 1 or 2. I'm sure there's many out there, but I probably know 2 people that work full time on top of owning a studio. And look, hats off to you, because it's hard. But yeah, I think for anyone who is wanting to open their own studio, maybe they're a bit more business savvy, than the average person. But yeah, one of the things we'd probably suggest is to consider your working situation. You might look at working casually somewhere else or part-time somewhere else and then running your own studio, but it's definitely a challenge to work full-time. And with who are we to tell you what to do? You know your own life better than what we do, but it's certainly a challenge.
One thing I don't know if I would do it. I'm not quite sure, but like a thought that came to me then was, like, I probably should have considered taking a leave of absence and just taking some time off, because it was available to me as part of our employee agreement. So at least then, if something had and COVID happened, I'm pretty sure my role never got replaced. So I probably would have ended up with a redundancy. But like, you just don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, I should have. That could be an option if that's what you're thinking. Can you take a leave of absence from your job if you are that little bit more risk adverse person, and you do want that comfort? And also, if you've got the right support, you can probably do both. Like with the right support, the right people in your business, the right family support, it's definitely achievable.
Yeah. Okay, some more hard hitting questions for you.
Ooh. Yes.
So I guess this one's going to be about who should open up a studio. So is there a minimum requirement in terms of skill level? And I know that there internationally isn't a minimum requirement, but do you, from your own personal experience, do you think that a pole dancer should have a minimum amount of skill set as a pole dancer before opening up their own studio? Or, you know, is there a recommended time frame that they've been in pole, do you think? So even maybe they might not be the most advanced, but they've been in the pole community for a certain period of time. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts as a business owner now is if shit hits the fan and you've got no one to cover and you don't have the skills to teach, then you're obviously going to impact your student experience. And you're going to be I wouldn't say letting down the community, because people do get sick. It happens. The community is generally pretty understanding, providing it's not happening all the time. But if you've got the skills to teach, then you're going to just be able to deliver a better experience if needed. So that is my general thoughts. So in saying that, I think you should be an instructor before going in. You don't have to be, if you're business savvy and you know how to lead people really well, you know how to communicate, you know how to delegate, then of course, like if you're in the pole community and you love it, you're probably going to run a really successful studio, providing you have the skills of leadership. And you've got enough of a team to support you. But if you're starting from scratch, most people who start from scratch are generally teaching a lot of the classes themselves. So you would probably want to, I think, if you were to go to do a pole dancing course, like instructor course, they recommend that you have at least 6 months experience in pole before doing it. I know previously to become an instructor in our studio, you had to be of an advanced level before you could become an instructor. There are exceptions to that rule depending on the person and what they can bring to the team. I'm not sure how other studios qualify their instructors, but that used to be one that we had, is you had to be advanced to be one, which means that just say you follow those rules, you've got 6 months experience in pole, you're loving it, you want to open a studio, you go do your qualification and get a job as an instructor, or you get to an advanced level, that's going to give you at least 2 years experience in the industry. And if it's something that you're thinking about doing and you haven't taught a class yet, I would probably, each to their own, but I'd probably recommend experiencing that, because that's what you're selling. So that is when that person walks into your studio and they want to buy your product, you need to sell that experience and you need to know what it's like, not just from your shoes, you need to know what it's like from several people's shoes. It might have a better outcome if you do know those things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that whilst a beginner could technically open up their own pole studio and it could be incredibly successful, it would then require the beginner to hire instructors that were able to be of all levels and teach all levels and be able to provide the product. And it's a lot of trust running a business is a lot of trust in employees regardless. Yeah. But it's a lot of trust that they're going to be the standard that you want. But the thing is, it's, as a beginner poler, you might not know the standard of care and due diligence that you want your instructors to provide to your students, because you actually haven't gone through that full process yourself. So I think understanding the awareness of your body as a student, and then being able to care for others as an instructor, that experience together sets you up to be a really good business owner in the pole industry. So
yeah, possibly. 100%, I agree. And I know when the studio was being sold, there was like a clause that you have to have at least X amount experience in the pole world. However, she was getting inquiries from people who have been a student at our studio for like 2 months. It's like, how, like, you've 2 months and you were like, yeah, I want to get in and I want to open a studio and be a studio owner. It's like, wow. Go you. Go
yeah.
you. It took me a long time to work up the courage to be like, I definitely want to own a studio.
Yeah. So I don't think I want to discourage anyone who's a beginner poler from wanting to open up a studio through this chat. I want to put some,
their experience might be different.
Yeah, and they might have incredible business experience. And to be honest, what's going to run a good business is a business person. And so that's, at the end of the day, what a pole studio is. But if you can combine your business experience and your pole personal experience and potentially like, instructing experience, that's going to make an excellent business. So I think that there's
Oh,
two
yeah.
really important things to think about there. So certainly, albeit from us to actually discourage people from opening up a studio if they're an absolute beginner, but I think it would certainly be quite advantageous. And you've also got to think about if you're a beginner, polar and an intermediate polar, and people are learning under you, or you're the instructor and they might not be, sorry, you're the owner, they're not directly learning under you, but they know that the studio is owned by a beginner and intermediate polar. Think about how that they might also feel as well. It might not be an issue, and for most people it probably won't be an issue if the instructor is of a decent level, but it gets
You can
complicated.
also, a lot of studios have head instructors who can take on that role of training people, bringing them on, and facilitating a lot of that stuff. So that is an option if you are if you don't have that experience in the pole world and you're like gun ho adamant that you want to be in the pole dancing industry and open a studio, there are options to you. You can have somebody else take that role, but thinking that takes from the profit of which you make, because that is an expense on your business. So you need to pay that person, obviously, to be able to do that role. So what do you do in the business why somebody else does that? And how does your business model look? And that's a completely different discussion. But there are things you have to think about is, if I'm not going to have that experience, how am I going to fill those gaps to be able to continue to upskill your people?
That's spot on, because they're going to have to provide the syllabus. They're going to have to, do everything as a part of.
Especially if you're not going through a franchise who is going to give you a syllabus, or give you all the information you need to run it. If you're doing this from scratch, then those are things that you need that should be thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just chatted about who. Can we chat about the why? Why should people open up a pole studio?
If I'm talking to younger me right now,
Let's talk to youngest Steph.
let's have a chat to youngest Steph. I think you need to, this can't be a you venture, like not in our industry. I know I wanted to start a studio because I loved the way pole made me feel. Pole literally gave me the confidence to make some of my most challenging decisions in life. Like, I remember getting up in my first MBA oral presentation and having to give this speech and going, I can dance on a competition stage. Like, this should be easy. And like, that gave me the confidence to get up there and deliver really, really well. But had I not had that experience, and pole has just pushed me so far out of my comfort zone in so many ways, and I love that about the sport. And if I had not had those experiences, I'm sure I would have got to where I was, but based on my path and my journey now, that's what I attribute a lot of my confidence building and a lot of my personal growth and change to. So I'm sure there's people who are listening or watching right now who are going, yes, I feel like that. I want people to have the same experience I have. So we're going to be thinking about what's your why then. You want to share that experience that you've had and you want other people to be able to have that experience. And then you need to think about how you're going to deliver that and how that comes out of you. Sometimes the reality is we're not the right people to be doing this, and that's okay, because business, it's a whole different kettle of fish. Like, it's not just like clock on at 8 a.m., clock off at 8 p.m. It is, even that's a big day, but like, it's not that simple. It's a lot. So you do need to really understand your why, and your why needs to be driven, I would say, by the community and how you're serving them and the experiences you're making. Because if you can nail that, the why of making money is going to flow way easier because you know what you're doing. And because, like, if one of your goals is, if you are one of those people, and I've done this, if you're one of those people that sit in a pole class and you're like, okay, I'm here, there's 10 other students here, per class, we're paying $30 a class. They're making $300 off this. They're probably only paying their instructor, let's say 40, to be a little bit higher, because I did that podcast episode. It said the average was about 35. Let's say 40. They're just making all this money off these people. I can do this. Like, this is going to be great. It's not that simple. So it is not that simple. But I know people think like that. And I know that because I've thought like that. And when I've shared that story, people are like, yeah, I thought that too. And a lot of people do look at studios in that way at times and go, oh, they're making a lot of money off this one class. But there's so many more elements that go into it. So if your desire is to make bank, maybe not pole dancing, not yet anyway. I had a really nice reality check. I can't remember if it was a podcast episode I was doing or something else recently. And we were talking about pole and we were talking about business. And the reality is, when we look at the world and the percentage of people who love pole dancing, it's really tiny. Like when you think about going global as a pole dancing business, like you're never going to hit as many people as there's not that many people interested as there is. And let's just say,
Bagel business.
yeah, like it's just like, it's unfortunately true. We haven't converted enough believers yet. And I'm sure we will get there one day.
They are missing out. For anyone who's like, why bagel business? I've been watching a lot of Schitt's Creek lately. So there was an episode about bagel business and that's where that came from. So,
I was like, okay, let's roll.
we're rolling with that bagel business. But yeah, you're spot on. It's a very niche market. And if you're a true business person and you're trying to make bank, like what you're saying, you would not look at a niche area that doesn't cater them to the mass market. You are not you're going to look at did I say that right? You're not going to look at a niche area. You're going to look at a bigger area that caters to the mass market.
Yeah. Or a niche area with a bigger exposure. Because a lot of it, and if anybody watching is the type of person that is on like a business real tunnel, like, and you get lost in this rabbit hole about business, they'll tell you to niche down, and do really, really well. And look, that is true. You need to know who you're marketing to, and marketing is a completely separate topic. And having a niche area is not a bad thing, but yeah, it's not going to make you tech money unless you're creating great tech for pole.
No, I think that's a really good explanation there. It's all about, if you're trying to make money, it's all about the exposure versus not.
Yeah. So I think like thinking about your why and why you did pole dancing, why you feel warm and fuzzy when you walk into a studio, what is it the studio does to make you feel warm and fuzzy? What gets you excited about it? Because you're going to need that to push you through, especially if you buy a business and then you get locked down into COVID. Like you're going to need to know your why. So it's important to be able to have that to come back to.
And so if anyone, for everyone watching, Ali May from Flexercise and I have done a lovely little chat in terms of goal setting and inner voice, and a big part of that chat was talking about finding your why. So if you're very interested to buckle down into finding your why, and it isn't just so sometimes superficial and going, I just want to open a studio to make people feel, happy. It can be a little bit deeper than that. So that's a good why, but what's the real why underneath it? So definitely check out that chat that I've had with Ali.
That sounds great. I can't wait to have a listen or a watch. I've got to remember these are all video. I can do both.
It's a podcast turned video, so it's not really a podcast, is it? But your podcast is on video.
Yeah, my podcasts I'm really bad at uploading them though. That's one thing I want to get better at this year. I need to go back to my why on the podcast. Like literally, I have to go back to my why. But there was something you said in that and about, rather than just a superficial why. One thing I've seen in the pole industry, and this was before I even owned it, is people want to become instructors because instructors have a status, right?
This is a topic.
And this is the same thing. Like, don't invest $100,000 potentially dollars or even $50,000 or whatever in a studio if you just want a status. Like, there's so many other ways you can validate yourself. It doesn't need to be like this.
I think you almost swore again.
Yeah. Like there is. And like, I think it's so easy. And I mean, the idea of becoming an instructor back when I became one was like so exciting, and I understand it. But you really got to think about it. Pole is a people business. Like people. I say all the time, like I know when I get burnt out, when I've done lots of people in, and that's when I've spent lots of time in the studio, lots of time with my team, It's a people business. So you got to figure out how you're serving your people.
It's the exact same thing that I say to people wanting to become physios. It's we are in the business to care for people. If you're there to try and join the profession to have a status or to become like, a sports physio, because they're seen as the cool physios, and I've done lots of sports, so I get it. But if that's like your desire, you are not in physio for the right reason. We are people. We are people. Yeah, we're going to go with that. We have to talk all day long. We have to care for people. But the main thing is caring, really. So if you don't care for someone, you are in the wrong industry. So if you don't care about creating an experience and care about bringing joy to others, if your focus is just on making bank and that alone, then you're in the wrong industry, unfortunately.
If you can't do a customer service role, question whether or not this is appropriate, because you are customer service to start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about more the business side of things then. So this is, like I said before, technically Pole Physio is a business, so I own a business, but I went about Pole Physio in a very unconventional way, we'll say. And I technically have like a triple diploma in business HR management, so I actually do have some qualifications, and I know you probably didn't know that. Because
I knew you had like lots of study, but I didn't know that.
I have lots of study. I have definitely done lots of study. Not many people know about me. I've got a triple diploma in business HR and management. I pushed through that, and I absolutely despised it. Fun fact. So this was done in my second year of being a physio, where I was basically told I would be buying into partnership. Like, they were going to give me an option to obviously buy into it, but they're like, no, we're setting you up for partnership into a business. And I was 2 years out as a physio, which no physio should ever do, buy into partnership at 2 years out. And I was like, okay, the responsible thing to do is to look into why, like, to understand a little bit more about business. First of all, I don't want to run a business if I don't know anything about running a business, but also why. And back then it was kind of similar. It was seen to be like the thing that you would just do. It was like, you started out as a physio, you maybe like became a senior physio, and then you owned a business. Kind of followed that pattern. But anyway, so I ended up going into business diploma and hated it, absolutely despised it, was like, this is not for me. And I, no joke, turned away. I completed it because I was like, I am not leaving this degree until I get my paper. But so I completed it, and I was like, never, ever, ever will I own a business. This is not something that I care about. And here I am owning a business. The difference is I'm owning a business that I care about. I didn't care about their business. I cared about mine. Yeah.
And you said before, like, you started in an unconventional way. I would say that it's becoming the more conventional way, like, especially in terms of online business. You are probably textbook online business from where you started, and using social media to grow. That's definitely the newer way of starting businesses, because so many people are trying to move away from bricks and mortar. And when I say bricks and mortar, it means like a pole studio. It is bricks and mortar, so it has a physical location. But yeah, wow, I find that so interesting.
No. Do I want to do an MBA? No. Famous last words? Maybe.
Maybe.
We'll wait and see. We'll see.
Well, I was going to say, like, you're like, I hated it. It's like, probably because it was all the theory stuff. And like I said, I'm not good with theory. I can sit in a classroom and I can listen and I can take in, but ask me to read a textbook.
Yeah.
Did not do lots of reading. I did a lot of listening.
The diploma was very focused towards the corporate world. And at no point could I see that applying to my small business. So what I was looking at then, and I guess what I'm doing now. So there's parts of it that was good and relevant, but most of it wasn't. So I guess that might be a learning curve for anyone out there who's like, I want to own a business one day, and they want to look into some sort of, education book. Do your research, see what the education you're looking at is targeted towards, if it's targeted towards corporate versus smaller business and so forth. All right, so bringing it back, did digress a bit. So if someone's looking at purchasing a pole studio, we've spoken about it would be potentially a franchise, a license, or their own brand. Are you able to explain the differences between, you kind of a little bit or have already done it, but explain the differences between a franchise and a license?
Yeah, 100%. So I did Google it to make sure I'm giving everybody the right information. So a license is pretty much you're buying a licenser's intellectual property. So as an example, when I brought into Addictive Pole Fitness and when I brought my studio, I agreed to also take on the license of Addictive Pole Fitness. So I was able to use, and I had rights to using the brand name, the logo, the trademarks, the copyright, the know-how, everything that they created, I had the ability to use. However, there was no, there's, you can use it, but there's no like hard rule on using it, right? So if you were to go to a franchise is similar. You get the ability to use the IP. However, the franchisor has more control over what you're doing potentially. So think about like a McDonald's is a really good one because they do have franchises. And every time, one thing Macca's is known for is consistency between their stores. The way their burgers are made, the amount of food that goes on each burger. That's what a franchise is. And Subways are exactly the same. So it has more specific direction on how you run your business. And you generally have to hit a particular way, or you go, everything you do has to be their policies and procedures, generally speaking. And that's just talking textbook, right? So, there's potentially franchises out there that don't run quite like that. License, you have a little bit more control. And then being a franchise, you have less control. Obviously, if you make the decision to have your own brand, you have all the control, but you have to create your syllabus, your policies, your procedures, your legal documents, your bookkeeping procedures. You have to make your HR documents, how much you're paying people. That is all created for you if you go down a franchise route and potentially a licensee route, depending on what's included in their license. So yeah, they've all got their pros and their cons. I would say I'm definitely the type of person who wants the freedom. I've never been one I look at the way my brain works is I look at something and I think about ways of how we can do better. Whereas some people are tick boxes, and tick boxes are great. And they just go, this is what I have to do. And I'm just going to work through my tick box and I'm going to do it and I'm going to get a result. So for those types of people, a franchise is probably a really good idea. With a franchise, you are going to have to be paying, depends how it's set up, you are going to be paying obviously an upfront fee, potentially a monthly fee. You will have more support from the franchisor who has obviously done this before. And you may also be paying royalties. Not sure. It depends on your contract. A license could be the same. So you would probably pay an upfront fee. It'd be less because you've got less support. You could be paying royalties. You could be paying an annual fee. Depends on the business and how they're set up. Or some places, like when I say royalties, it's a percentage of what you're making. So yeah, it depends. Obviously, if you have a brand, you've just got to pay for everything and figure it out on your own.
I was going to say, it's a lot of work, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
I cannot explain in how much depth, how much work it is to create your own brand. It's a lot. So
the colors, the fonts, that's just the visual stuff. And then I'm still going, I brought an existing business. And like I said before, I look at things and I like to change things. So I literally flipped the business upside down and now am rewriting all the policies, all the procedures. So I've gone backwards. I've done all the doing and just get the shit done, get in the way I want it. And now it's like, okay, now let's write those procedures or those policies. So
be so proud of me. I was actually going to email you last week, but didn't because I was like, very close to Christmas, New Year's period. Didn't want to bother you during time of leave.
You can bother me anytime.
I know, but I was like, can I email you to be like, I wrote my policies and procedures book and you'd be so happy with me.
Oh, yay!
Anyway, I got it done. I was very happy. But I thought of you the whole time and I was like, Steph will be so proud of me.
Oh, I'm still I think I've got like 3 or 4 policies to go. And then my procedures. But I think I've made a decision with my procedures. And this is the thing that you can do is I'm going to video it and I'm going to talk through it. And then I'm going to send it off to somebody and pay somebody to write the actual procedure. I'm going to be like, here's my video. Can you just write a procedure?
Right. That's smart. I like that. And you can do it in the medical world. You can dictate letters. So I don't see why you can't do that. Makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm going to do that because I don't have that patience.
Yeah. I was saying get someone to put in a really nice looking pretty document, and then you don't have to worry about graphic design, and boom, done.
Yeah, done.
All about aesthetics. All right, let's talk about franchising a little bit more, very briefly.
Yeah.
But there are obviously pros and cons, which you've touched on already. So I think the big things for those who are listening at home to understand is that the pros of owning a franchise are that it would probably come with fully choreographed and designed pole dancing classes, courses, all ready to go. It is a brand already, so it, depending on how long it's been established, it'll be recognized within the industry and known within your local community. So it could be an international brand, or it could be a national brand, but just very well known and respected, or it could be a smaller brand. But yeah, that's something to take into consideration. If you're in a franchise, you're going to be, your instructors are going to have, and you yourself are going to be able to collaborate, I guess, with the other owners of the other franchises. So you'll quite often have nights or days where you go and do professional training with them. So there's that integration with the other studios, which
Yeah.
is nice. Yeah. And then induction training programs, and then ongoing professional development and support. So I think they're the biggest pros of a franchise. Can you think of any others off the top of your
Generally speaking, if you're a part of a franchise, the marketing plan is already set.
huge pro? Yeah.
Yeah. I spend like a good 2 solid days a week, or like I spend a lot of time on marketing already, and then I still need more. I've also created a mammoth freaking thing, but anyway, yeah, you've obviously got the support. They'll have the inductions, the professional development. They've normally got a better internal system, so you can log on, you can find the things. Whereas I know when I started as an instructor, I was just given booklets to be like, this is what you do, but they'll have videos and stuff because they're a little bit more established. So yeah, they would probably be the things. I think one of the things now that APF or Addictive is only a one studio brand, we miss the, having in-house comps, because you can obviously have, as a group, you guys most brands have in-house competitions, or like a battle of the gyms or whatever. So you miss that, but a lot of the other stuff is done together.
So you miss that collaboration with the other pole studios.
Yeah, because like it can be competitive. It's, as much as we're supportive, if you've got a studio down the road, they are a key competitor. And I don't want to use competitor in a negative sense, but when you think about business, we all have competitors. Competitors are generally the direct line to the same business. So like pole studio. You've also got substitutes. So substitutes are like Pilates, yoga. I've got so my studio is a female studio. We've got a female gym down the road. So that is also a substitute to our product, because it helps you achieve the same goal of fitness, because we're generally fitness. So yeah, so they're things that you have to think about. So when you do miss that, there is that little bit of competition there if they're not the same brand.
And you've got to think about what sells you apart. And, we know that you're not just fitness. We know that there's way more to Addictive Pole Fitness, despite fitness being in the name. We know there's so much more to it than fitness. We know that
people who have never pole danced don't know that. And they're like, oh, we have like a Fernwood, or we have a pole studio. What are the differences? Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. So I think that's definitely a really well pointed out con there in terms of franchising. The other one that comes to mind is the restrictiveness of it all. So whilst some people absolutely love the fact that you can walk in and the franchise does everything for you, it basically will tell you how your pole studio should look. So your reception area, it will give you like the layout of what material the desk should be, like how it should look, the colors on the wall, the logo position. It will give you pretty much all of those details, the paint color. So you can go down to your local paint shop and basically go, I need however many liters of this particular paint. Like you don't have to, it takes all the thinking out of it, but it does. Like it really does. That's what franchise agreements are. They like, you have to, but that means you have to look to the point of what that franchise wants. You look at any McDonald's, they all look pretty much identical, despite the fact that the layout might be slightly different because the space, they're pretty much all the same. So
yeah. And what you would expect with a franchise is, if I walk into one studio, I'm going to have almost the exact same experience if I walk into the next. So if I was to go to another one, that is the expectation of a franchise. You know
Yeah.
what you get.
Yeah. So my studio that I go to is a part of a franchise, and I know that all the upskilling of instructors gets done by, one person. So people will travel from all over the state to be upskilled by that, those particular instructors. So I know that the experience should be pretty much universal amongst all studios in my state. So yeah, you're spot on. There's so much, but that in itself can be quite restrictive. So
As you're saying that, I was like getting anxiety to be like, oh, I couldn't do it, because they watch your performance as well. Like,
yeah.
However, one thing about being a business owner and obviously going from such a corporate environment is I always had somebody above me. Like, I was always talking to somebody above me. Now it's just me. Like, I'm like, oh, can't blame it on somebody else. For one, I have to hold myself accountable. But if you need that, then a franchise is going to be great, because they are they are monitoring your performance. You have KPIs, you have things that you have to achieve. However, for some people, that's what they need. For other people, it's not what the idea of somebody walking into another studio and getting the same experience is hard to replicate, right? Like, especially because we're such people. We are people. We are prone to errors as individuals, and Pole is a service-based business. The other thing that could be a con to this is if they walk into Simone's Pole studio, Underwood down the road, and you provide a really bad experience, I'm automatically not in the running for that person's. Like, that's just ruined it for everybody.
Yeah, it's affected the whole franchise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it needs to be at a certain standard. It has to be across the board. And yeah, you're spot on. There's so many factors to consider there when it comes to franchising. But yes, I think understanding that there are definitely pros and cons of that, and that potentially for those who love the pros, amazing. For those who get really yanked, like they hear the cons and they go, that gives them anxiety, but they're looking at purchasing a studio. Maybe you're the sort of person that needs a license. Creating your own brand from scratch. So
100%. And I think from what I've seen is a lot of the options are generally franchises for Pole. I've seen a couple of licenses, but yeah, you'll see a lot of them are generally a franchise environment.
Do you think it's harder for an independent, so like your own brand pole studio, to do well within the pole industry? Well, I mean, obviously we're talking about Australia here specifically.
Yeah.
Reflect this on the market internationally, but in Australia, do you think it's hard? There's a few out there.
Yeah, there is. And like, I'm trying to think back. I think about our current environment. So I'm based in Brisbane. It would be hard to just open up a small little studio if you don't have a brand already as, a great pole dancer. Because how do you actually, I want to take this back, because Brisbane, there's so many gaps where there's not studios. Like, we're not as dense as, let's say, Sydney. But let's say you open one in Sydney where you've got big names, big pole names. It would be really hard to compete with that. And yeah, I would say it would be challenging. You would have to really hone in on your marketing, and you would have to really hone in on what makes you guys unique. Because I do know one of the reasons why I never wanted to rebrand away from Addictive is because in Brisbane, our name has a good reputation, and I didn't want to have to rebuild that.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Brisbane specifically, and there are so many franchises up in Brisbane, that's for sure. Yeah. There's definitely quite a few franchises as well, but I'm thinking about the one that comes to mind is Deb Roach's Stargazer. Like, she's done a very, very good job of figuring out who her niche market is, and
100%.
So Steph and I are having way too much fun chatting. So we are going for way longer than we expected, because we like to chat, don't we, Steph?
There's no surprise there.
No, not at all. So what we're going to do is create this into a 2-part series as well. So stay tuned for part 2 that will be released next week with Steph and myself, where we'll be going into all the details about franchising versus licensing a business. And then we'll be talking a lot about what it actually means to create a business and the plan that comes with it and all the little things that you have to think about. So stay tuned for the second part, and we look forward to seeing you back soon.